So I want to record a little bit of some cape creation for Minecraft capes. It's not something I normally do, so this isn't going to be a perfect representation of the general process. But I feel like that this is a pretty good cape to start with because it's not a full image creation and it's mostly manipulation, but it's not a really default one. It's a lot of really cool tools and processes. So let's start with what this cape is. Now, this is supposedly a new Bedrock cape that's been found in the code. I have not verified this. I just know what I've been told. To me, all it is a cape that uh, exists and has been requested. Now, I constantly get capes in this format from other sites advertising their capes, and it's a really easy way to, there is a really easy way to alter the cape and get it down to what it needs to be. So I have pulled said cape up in this here. This is Photoshop, of course, and it has the tool we need, which is called Perspective Warp. And what it does is it allows us to outline what the current perspective of our image is, and then essentially warp it to be the perspective we need it to be. And it does some really, really cool stuff when it comes down to it. Like it's essentially just taken the whole image and rotated it to where every pixel is mostly straight. It's not the smartest at it. As you can see, there's a little bit of tilt to it still, but it does do the job fairly well. And while I might be able to get it a little bit better, I wouldn't be able to get it nearly as well that fast. Now, our next step is we need to get this down to a size that our template will actually match it. Now, based on how this looks, we can see that it does follow the base template as it is, which is the 64 by 32 template. Now, this is 10 by 16, so we need this cape to match 10 by 16. Now, the ratio that it has is not 10 by 16. I believe it's 9 by 18, so it's about 1 to 2. And the reason for that is because before we warped it, it was still kind of slanted outwards towards the character, so we have a bit more height than width, even though the width is rather accurate. So if we go to image size, we're going to see, if we set this to be 10, that'll be 18. So we have to knock that off, and that'll be scaled down to the proper size. And that is a fairly good representation of that, I think. Looks like all the pixels match up pretty well. The color might be a little bit less saturated, but that might be because I'm against a darker background. But I think that's a pretty good representation. So now all we have to do is we can take this, paste it over here once we take it out of indexed mode. Let's see, image mode, RGB. There we go. And that should be our cape. Now again, that clearly looks less saturated than you. Again, that might be because of the way it looks, but I personally would want to bring the saturation a little bit higher, which is actually fairly easy to do. So with that, we now have our cape kind of sorted out, but it looks pretty bad. We've got it up against a pretty bad template. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes getting the edges of the cape matched up, and I will see you in a second. And I think that works pretty well. Kind of continue the same grouping and pattern of color grouping over this side. Now, seeing as I only have the cape on here rather than the elytra attached to it, we're going to come to the bottom and essentially just remove the template that we have. Now, that is a fully functional cape. And I think it works really well because the entire process I find really fun. Um, Rotating the cape to where it actually matches the proper template and scaling it down to the right size because you took a higher resolution picture of it, I think is a really cool process rather than just individually going, okay, I've got to come here, match that color, move 3 pixels down and 5 to the left, and place it there. And I think this process is a lot cooler, gives a much more accurate representation. Again, I did kind of saturate it a bit, but just eyeing that, I think this looks more accurate compared to what that is. I may be completely wrong on that, but my eyes are just broken. So I think that looks really good. And that's the cape that I'm going to hand off. So see you guys next time.